welcome back. As Brother Clive said, we begin now our third study together under the title, Go Your Ways and Pour Out the Vials of the Wrath of God. Now, we do need to just flip back and to finish off a couple of slides. And normally in a situation like this, I'd like to say, no, we don't need those. We can just go straight into the first study. But I think you will be impressed with this fact. In fact, I want to impress you with this fact, is that we really need to just look at those last sections of Revelation 11 to fully appreciate, or more fully appreciate, the content of Revelation 16. Because the link between these two chapters is absolutely critical that we understand them. Alrighty, now that's echoing a bit there, so if I make that adjustment, is that a bit better? Alright, so picking up from where we left off. Alright, now that's our title for the third study. We'll come to that in due time, and it won't be very long. But we do need to tidy up some things, as we said a moment ago, to see that critical, inseparable, important link between chapter 11 and, of course, chapter 16. Alrighty, we left our last study with this statement from Vials, The French Revolution, and page 231. An historical statement that really does cement and confirm the fact that our brethren, not our brethren and sisters, the witnesses who were slain and finally and ultimately politically gagged in the revocation of the Edict of Nantes in 1685, they remained in that 100-year period, and we pinpoint that, of course, as 105 years, they remained a powerful and ever-watchful body. And so you will notice that there was someone in those verses, let's pick it up here, just so we understand this. I had a slide on this, but time doesn't permit me to look at that slide. But in Revelation 11, you'll read, brothers and sisters, that when they fell down in that great street, you read in verse 9 of Revelation 11, that they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3.5 days, or 105 years, between 1685 and 1789, and they shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put into graves. So someone in this symbol is saying, don't bury them. And when it says they, brothers and sisters, will not suffer them to be put into graves, we are talking about the Protestant countries that existed outside of France. Switzerland, the Netherlands, England, and so forth. They gave refuge to the fleeing Huguenots, and one day they would come back. And therefore, it's interesting to note that the first time the word refugee appears in the English language was at this time in 1685, when the Huguenots were awfully persecuted but given succour by the Protestant nations around France. So when it says they will not suffer their dead bodies, we're talking about those Protestant countries that would give them refuge as they became refugees, waiting for this time, brothers and sisters, in 1789, after the 105 years, where we read, oh, France is in trouble. There's a train coming down the track, brothers and sisters and young people, that is out of control. And therefore we pick up the record in Revelation chapter 11 and verse 11 through 13, and we read these words, when the witnesses are going to stand on their feet again. Verse 11. And after 3 days and a half, the Spirit of life from God, God's in control. This is not just events that are happening and people are picking up the arm of the flesh and saying, God is in control. God breathes the Spirit of life into these witnesses, and they would stand upon their feet. And great fear would fall upon those that had them fallen or slain in the first place. And they heard a great voice from heaven saying unto these witnesses, come up. Now, brothers and sisters, this great voice from heaven saying to whoever they were speaking to, whoever the voice was from heaven is saying, come up. Here, in the context of France, we are in 1789. And France is in trouble. And there we have Louis XVI. He's seated up there. There we have the assembled parliament in France, and he is in trouble. And he's panic-stricken, as the nation is. And this great voice from heaven in verse 12, twice used, are the political heavens of France. This is the government of France. And here is Louis XVI, brothers and sisters, saying to all of these people, it's a great crowd, we need to sort the problem out. We need you to come up and assemble so we can sort out the mess. And quite frankly, the mess was France was broke. And Louis XVI is in trouble. And so he assembles this parliament. It was a parliament, brothers and sisters, or the Estates General was a French legislative body that was established way back there in 1302. And this Estates General that Louis calls to be assembled was actually a body comprising of three groups or estates of society: your clergy, your nobility, and your commoners. They had an interesting way of voting. I'll talk with you about that in a moment. And he is in panic-stricken mode because he calls this great cloud of people as he convenes the Estates General on May 5th in 1789, does Louis XVI at Versailles, in a desperate attempt to stave off civil unrest. And the country was going down the drain very quickly. And so what Louis did, Louis XVI, he called a Swiss financial advisor over to his side. He said, I'm in trouble. And the Swiss financial advisor said to Louis XVI, what's your problem? And Louis said, I'm broke. The country's going down the drain. Quick, smart. What do you think I should do? And so the Swiss financial advisor said to Louis XVI, there are two issues. Stop spending, or there will be a revolution. So Louis XVI went to his wife, as you would, and he said to his wife, Marie Antoinette, I just spoke with my Swiss financial advisor and he said to me, stop spending. What should I do? And Marie said, sack him. And he did. And there was a revolution. I mean, Marie Antoinette, sweet little thing she was, 14 when she got married to Louis XVI. Sweet little thing, daughter of the Austrian Emperor, Holy Roman Empire. That's why the French had this terrible hatred of Austria, because of poor little Marie Antoinette. I mean, the story goes that, the people have got no bread. She never said that. Let's get that right for the record. The rumour is that Marie said they've got no bread, give them cake. She never said that. That wasn't attributed to her. But I'll tell you this is historical, this is factual. They had a nickname for Marie Antoinette, Sacking, because he says don't spend. Well, her nickname was Madame Deficit. So the people called her Madame Deficit because the country was going down the drain because she was spending all of Louis' money and all of the country's money. Sacking. And he did. And so, brothers and sisters, this is awful train out of control coming down the railway tracks, and France is in deep trouble. Now, here we have the establishment of the Estates General in 1302. They hadn't met for 175 years, the Estates General. 175 years, they've never met. And now it's absolutely critical that Louis does something. And therefore, historians tell us this convening was something way out of the box. This was so dramatic and so unusual, it gets a place in Revelation chapter 11 and verse 12. Well, of course it does. Now, the clergy and the nobility and the commoners, way back there in 1302, had the way of voting simply by estates. So each estate got one vote. Didn't matter whether there was 300 clergy, they got one vote. Didn't matter whether there was 1,000 nobility, they got one vote. Didn't matter whether there was 50,000 commoners, they got one vote. So they'd all discuss something, they go, what do you think, clergy? Yeah, we're into that. What about you nobles? Yeah, we support the clergy. What about you commoners? Well, no, sorry, you're outvoted 2-1, and that's the way it went. And here were the commoners, and they made up 90% of the country, and they could never, ever outweigh or outmuscle or elbow their way through the clergy and the nobility. They strangled, as you see, well, for months, brothers and sisters. When they called the Estates General, they weren't arguing about the problems of finance and the fact that bread was so expensive people couldn't buy it. They weren't arguing about that. That was the issue. They were arguing about, should we have votes like this? Should we vote for... And Louis couldn't get them to sort it out. worrying, well, if they all go, we change the voting system, maybe it's the nobility pushing their point. If we change the voting system, maybe it's the commons. And so they, for month after month after month, were trying to figure out how we're going to vote before we start talking about the country's problems. Well, Louis said, and he was advised to do this, he said, give them 300, and give them 600. At least they're in for a chance. At least they know when they go there to meet. But the commoners are going, hang on, we've been meeting for months. We're actually liking this. We're actually getting confident in talking to one another. Who makes up the nation? We do. The third estate is everything. We're 90% of the nation. We can go alone, thank you very much. And if the clergy and the nobility want to jump on board, we'll let them jump on board. And so what they did, brothers and sisters, they were all coming there to have this big meeting. Louis, the stupid man, was told, you better get together with the commoners and you better sort this out because they're going to do something that's going to be circumventing your power. And so Louis said, all right, I'll sit down with them and I'll compromise. They didn't tell the commoners. So what he did was he said, oh, we'll do a meeting in this great estates hall. So make sure whoever's in there gets out so we can have this meeting with the commoners. They didn't tell the commoners. So in comes this person with authority, he says, get out, I'm locking up. And they thought Louis was up to something that he should be up to. And so what did this group do, brothers and sisters? They went across the road to the tennis court and they said, Louis is trying to circumvent what we're trying to do. And so the commoners said, we're going alone. So on the 17th of June, 1789, they voted to make themselves a national assembly. We are the nation, not the nobility, not the clergy. If you want to join us, do it. But we're going alone. Stupid Louis, all he had to do was to get his communication right, but he didn't. And so Louis' efforts to repress this new national assembly that would be based on the commoners caused widespread rioting. Well, there they were, brothers and sisters. They're over there in the tennis court because it was raining outside, and they were locked out of this great big hall, thinking Louis was up to no good. But all he wanted to do was to sit down and talk to them. He didn't tell them. So there they are, they're over in the tennis court, and they are voting themselves as a national assembly, and they said, we will not move until we have rewritten the Constitution of France. Verse 11, they stood on their feet, and there you've got all these commoners. You've got a few clergy that flipped across with them and a few of the nobility, but basically they were the commoners. And so, brothers and sisters, this new National Assembly published a decree proclaiming liberty of opinions, both religious and political. The witnesses were back, standing on their feet. And the property of the exiled Huguenots, unsold at that date, should be restored to their rightful heirs. You know, brothers and sisters, there are some verses in the Bible that leap out at you and you think, is this the word of God or is it not? Is this accurate or is it not? And sometimes we quiver when we read the words. Have a look at this. In the same hour, there was a great earthquake, the political shakings in France. And a tenth part of the city, a tenth part of Europe, France, fell in this great shaking. And there was slain of men 7,000. Now you've got to imagine, most of you, it doesn't say there was slain of men 7,000. What does it say in the margin? The names of men, thank you, Mark, indeed. The names of men were slain. 7 is the number of perfection. So here, brothers and sisters, in this revolution, in the commoners, the third estate as they move, here you've got the obliteration of the perfection of titles. Names were no longer permitted in France. You couldn't call yourself a duke, you couldn't call yourself a count, you couldn't call yourself a marquis. Louis XVI was not allowed to have the title Your Majesty or Sire. Everybody, including Louis, was citizen. Hello, citizen Louis. Bye, citizen Louis. No one was allowed to have a title. What an amazing thing. And all the Bible says was the perfection or completeness of titles was absolutely obliterated in France in the time of the French Revolution. And it says the remnant were affrighted. Well, brothers and sisters, as we entered into the awful period from 1789, 1790, 1791, 1793, things were getting very bad in France. I mean, no titles. If you were an aristocrat, that meant death. If you were even suspected of being an aristocrat, you watch out for Mark, he's a duke. He's gone. Watch out for Henry, he's a marquis. He's gone. Just breathe a whisper. Make a suggestion that person's an aristocrat and got a title and he's gone. A breath of opposition to the course of events meant death, and it was an awful place to be, brothers and sisters, in 1793 through 1794, where the reign of terror was institutionalised. And in 1793, Louis XVI got his head chopped off. And toward the end of 1793, Marie Antoinette got her head chopped off. And all the Catholic kings of France are going, what just happened? The Bourbons, the kings of France, the epitome of Catholicism in the world of Europe. They just chopped his head off. They got rid of the monarchy. And therefore, brothers and sisters, Europe was shaking enormously at the ripples that were coming from France. Now, we alluded to this last evening. Amazingly accurate. You read the next part of that verse. And then they gave glory to the God of heaven. They feared and gave glory to the God of heaven. And what happened as an accumulation of their campaign, or a culmination of their campaign, of moral regeneration? The National Convention, which was the way in which France was now governed, they had a National Assembly, that didn't work. Then they had a Legislative Assembly, that didn't work. Now they got a National Convention, that didn't work. And then they had a Directorate, that didn't work. Then they had a Consulate, that didn't work. And in came Emperor Napoleon. Well, that worked for a long time, let me tell you. So all the way through the French Revolution, there's all these different forms of government. What about the third form here? As a culmination of their campaign of moral regeneration after the awful reign of terror in 1793. The National Convention, the third form of government, first met in September 1792, and they authorised the creation of a civic religion and called it the cult of the Supreme Being. They worshipped the God of heaven. And Robespierre introduced the legislation with a special speech entitled On the Principles of Political Morality. He said immorality, did Robespierre and his Jacobins. He declared immorality is the basis of despotism. Look at him, Louis XVI. He then said, as virtue is the essence of the Republic, and therefore, brothers and sisters, Robespierre proposed the decree be adopted, and it was adopted in France by acclamation, that the French people acknowledged the existence of the Supreme Being and the immortality of the soul, and that the French people in 1793, so horrified were they by the reign of terror, that they acknowledged that the worship most worthy of the Supreme Being is the practice of the duties of man. And all the Bible says is they feared and they gave glory to the God of heaven. What an amazing thing our Bible is. History, therefore, brothers and sisters, testifying to that very case. Well, now the scene is open and ready and set for Revelation 16. So the French Revolution would be the springboard of all the things that would happen in Revelation chapter 16. Now, what I want to do before we look at chapter 16 and go and have a look at the career of Napoleon in the first instance is just to show you a couple of very important things with respect to the link, the critical links between these two chapters. And we've thus seen, brothers and sisters, with respect to chapter 11, the French Revolution, 1789, every witness has ceased and now the witnesses have come back to life. We've already seen in Revelation 11 verse 14 that the second woe is past. The sixth trumpet. The second woe trumpet is past. And behold, the third woe cometh quickly. That's what Revelation 11:14 says. Well, there's your third woe. It's your seventh trumpet. So the second woe is gone with the French Revolution, and now we've got these vials are about to take place. Well, that's Revelation chapter 16. Now what we need to understand, brothers and sisters, is this, is that these 30 years of Napoleon's career in these first 5 vials came very quickly. Behold, the second woe is past. Louis gone. Marie's gone. The French Revolution is, well, it's well and truly being established, and they're trying to sort out what kind of government they're going to have in France after the monarchy, the Bourbons were kicked out. Well, here you know, brothers and sisters, the third woe cometh quickly. And it did. The first bowl was poured out of the... Why did God just stop all the speed of the pouring out of bowls? There's a very good answer, which we'll answer in our last study after lunch. But for now, brothers and sisters, what we really need to understand is this, is the connection you see. Now, what I want you to do, if you haven't done this before, just have a look at Revelation 11, verse 14. Now, we're going to clarify or clear up a few little issues here, just before we launch into chapter 16. Alright, now, Revelation 11, the sixth trumpet is just the second half of the sixth trumpet in Revelation 11 has just finished. Verse 14. Second woe is past. Behold, the seventh trumpet's coming quickly. Now, if you want to follow the continuity of the story, you would actually go from verse 14, after you've read the end of verse 14, straight to Revelation 16, to pick up the continuity of the story. Oh yes, from verse 15 in chapter 11 through to the end is an overview of the seventh trumpet. It's just a broad brush of the seventh trumpet. But if you want to follow chronologically the story of the Apocalypse, you'd read the end of verse 14, and then you'd go to chapter 16 and pick up the detail of the third woe. That is, the vials, as they start being poured out initially, very, very quickly. Question. Why does God do this? Why has God interrupted what appears to be a beautiful, smooth, which it is, chronological story from that verse in chapter 11 straight into chapter 16? Why does God put chapter 12, 13, 14 and 15 in the way? Well, there are very easy and logical and appropriate answers to that question. The first answer is this. John has just been introduced in chapter 11 to a beast. You see that? Chapter 11 and verse 7. And when they shall have finished their testimony, the witness, the beast, John has not seen this creature at all until now. It's taken 11 chapters of the Apocalypse before he sees this great big creature. We're not told what the beast looked like there, but we do know what it looked like because we've got other chapters. So John sees this great creature arise out of it. He got no idea. What's more, we have got no idea in Revelation 11 about these symbols: temple, altar, holy city, 2 witnesses, 42 months, 1,200. These are symbols that we would have no idea, brothers and sisters, as to what they meant. So the beast and these new symbols introduced in these first 4 verses, we don't know. God says you need to take a step back. Let's take you back in history in Revelation 12 and 13 and not only show you how the beast originated, so you really understand it, John. Pagan, Christian dragon, sea beast, earth beast, image of the beast. When John's finished chapter 12 and 13, he not only knows about the beast, but he's seen the beginning of the witnesses, and he's also seen the treading down of the holy city by virtue of the fact that focus would have been giving the beast in Rome power and authority. Can you see why chapter 12 and 13 is so necessary? Straight after chapter 11, so we get those points. Well, why is chapter 14 there? Well, I tell you, brothers and sisters, after reading chapter 12 and 13, you're thinking, beasts, 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 nothing but beasts, beasts, all the way through. And it just seems in chapter 12 and 13, this beast knows no bounds. This beast has got power and authority that nobody can withstand. Is there going to be any end to the creature? That's why chapter 14 is there, because the very first verse of chapter 14 tells John this horrible monster in chapter 12 and 13 is going to be beaten by another beast. A little lamb. So verse 1, and I looked and I saw another beast. Imagine that. A little lamb. And therefore you read in verse 8, and there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, is fallen. That's why chapter 14 is there, brothers and sisters, to just give John a little lift after he's needed to know who the beast is, because he wouldn't be able to work out chapter 11. And he needs to know who the holy city is. He needs to know who the witnesses are, which were established in that 12th and 13th chapter. Why is chapter 15 there? interrupting the flow from chapter 11 through to chapter 16. Well, when you come to chapter 15, 10 verses, smallest chapter of the Apocalypse. And that chapter doesn't have to be there, but God slips chapter 15 in there just to show you and me that the Apocalypse is not just history. Chapter 15 is slipped in there, brothers and sisters, to show that you and me have got to see ourselves involved in the work of the angels. And so when you really come to understand chapter 15, you're ready to walk with Napoleon. You're excited to take interest in this career of this man, because you're being told in chapter 15, get interested in this, because you're going to finish the work that this man begins in chapter 16. So there's a legitimacy of putting chapter 12, 13, 14 and 15 interrupting the flow. What an amazing thing the Apocalypse is. Well, we then start now, having used the French Revolution as a springboard, now we come in, brothers and sisters, to this section of Revelation chapter 16. And we now, brothers and sisters, these first 5 vials in Revelation chapter 16, verse 111, are all about God's judgments on an empire that would... It's always embarrassing, isn't it, when you walk down the front of the hall. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop, because you'll be watching him and asking yourself, when will he come out before me? I would be too.
Not bigger than Napoleon.
Pardon me?
Not bigger than Napoleon.
He is. But so am I, actually. So I'll show you that in a minute. It's a fact. It's an historical fact. Is he going to... He's going to be good. No, he's not coming. All right, we'll carry on. All right, brothers and sisters. Now here we've got Revelation chapter 16. He is coming. He is coming. Here he comes. Okay. Now we've got Revelation chapter 16, which really, brothers and sisters, is all about God bringing an end to an empire that had existed for over 1,000 years. And God's going to raise up in Revelation 16, using the French Revolution as a platform, as a springboard, as it were. God is going to raise up a man of destiny who would bring this empire, this holy Roman Empire, he was going to bring this empire blood to drink. Oh, look at verse 6 of Revelation 16. For they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and thou hast given them blood to drink, for they are worthy. So here was a man of destiny, raised up by God to particularly and peculiarly bring this holy Roman Empire to its knees and bringing them blood to drink. And Napoleon, brothers and sisters, was a man who emerged from the French Revolution. In fact, Napoleon was a man who used the French Revolution to catapult him to stardom. And all these things that he did, many of those things were based on what had happened in the French Revolution. Now, of course, Napoleon was 20 years old when the French Revolution broke out. 20, 1789. And so as a teenager, Napoleon saw the rumble of this out-of-control train coming down the tracks, you see. And as a man, he then used the revolution to put him into a stardom, the likes of which had rarely been seen among men. In fact, historians tell us that Napoleon was the greatest commander, the greatest military tactician since Alexander the Great. He was an amazing individual. He really was, brothers and sisters, a man of destiny. But he had a few problems. But you see, Napoleon was born there, in Corsica. And it was only a few years before he was born that Corsica was conquered by the French. And so Napoleon grew up in Corsica absolutely hating the French with a passion. And what's more, he could hardly speak the French language. And what's more, Napoleon was only 5'2". That, brothers and sisters, is there. And so here's a man who comes in, who hates the French, can't speak the French language very well at all. He had this thick Corsican accent, and he's 5'2", and 10 years after the French nation voted themselves a national assembly, saying we're not going to have this monarch rule over us with despotism. 10 years after that happened, in 1799, this 5'2" hater of the French, can't speak the language, walks in 1799 and says, I'm your chief consul, I'm your dictator. That would never, ever have happened in the natural scheme or course of things. The angels of God, brothers and sisters, were working in the man's life, in Napoleon's life. And so we have, therefore, brothers and sisters, this man would come along, he would be the heir to the revolution, and he would reorganise France, and he would conquer pretty much most of Europe. He was, in fact, a man of destiny. Now, we're going to be looking in our study, what's left of it, these first 11 verses, which deal with the first 5 vials. They deal with the 30 years of behold, the third woe cometh quickly. Now, of course, like Revelation 11, Revelation 16 culminates in a great earthquake. Of course, this is the greatest of all the 3 great earthquakes in the Apocalypse. Not a bad idea for those of us who haven't done this, just to get a brief overview, like we did in Revelation 11, of Revelation chapter 16. So just pinpointing where the vials are, and a very few brief comments about them, and then we'll flip back and have a look at some selected details out of this 16th chapter. Now in verse 2, we read that the first vial was poured out upon the earth. French Revolution was going to lay the pavement for this first vial. Now we read it was poured out upon the earth. Now what I want to do, brothers and sisters, this morning is just to make sure in verse 2 that we really come to terms with this expression in verse 2, the earth, the beast, and the image. How are the beast, the image, and the earth related? Are they related? Are they linked? Are they the same? So I want this morning to make sure that we clearly, unequivocally understand these 3 expressions in this first vial, or first bowl. Now the second vial was poured out in verse 3 upon the sea. And we read there that the sea became the blood of a dead man. And every living creature of the sea died. I mean, the blood of a dead man. I mean, dead men's blood. Tell no lies. I mean, dead man, as a pirate stick, I shouldn't be saying that. But the blood of a dead man doesn't flow. So what you have here in the second vial is that there's a cessation of the flow of something. Whatever that is. Now I find this really interesting. The detail will come in a moment. Something's going to happen in the second vial where a flow of something, a flow of blood, is allowed to be stopped in order, brothers and sisters, for the third vial, where the third angel poured out in verse 4 his bowl upon the rivers and fountains of waters, that they become blood. So there's a really interesting correlation or comparison between the second and the third vial. Second vial, stop the flow of blood. Why? Because in the third vial, I want blood to flow copiously. No blood, flowing blood copiously. You won't see how that happened historically. Stop the flow there, and in order that blood might flow with alacrity and celerity in this third vial. Well, that's the third one. Now the fourth vial, brothers and sisters, we read in verse 8, was poured upon the sun, whatever that is. And power was given to someone, him, to scorch men with fire. You wait for you to see historically how that amazingly was enacted with respect to Napoleon, scorching men with fire, and men were scorched with great heat, but continue to blaspheme the name of God. Well, that's our fourth vial. Our fifth vial is in verse 10. And the fifth angel poured out his bowl upon the throne of the beast. And this throne of the beast would have a kingdom that would be full of darkness. And he would gnaw his tongue with pain. And then we come in the record for our sixth vial, which will be the thrust of our study after lunch, the sixth vial was poured out upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up. Now, just continuing and finishing off our little chart on the screen, our seventh vial, which is not our brief in this series of studies, but the seventh vial in verse 17 was poured into the air, into the political area, into the political arena. And that would be, the seventh vial would be particularly and peculiarly the 40-year period between Armageddon and the beginning of the millennium. The work yet to come. You and I, brothers and sisters, will be involved in completing the sixth vial, and you and I, God willing, will be involved in carrying out the work of the seventh vial in the age to come. Alright, now that's just where the vials find their place in chapter 16. What we also need to do is just to pick out, from a big picture point of view, a few salient points before we do merge into chapter 16. And I'd like to start out with a brief overview by just reminding ourselves of some key verses in the Apocalypse, and this is one of them. You know, you read some verses and there is an alarm ringing in your ears, and it's got to be one of these verses. It's got to be Revelation 15 verse 1. You can't read Revelation 16 and really get the gist of this chapter until we drink in verse 1 of chapter 15. Because we read this, and I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvellous, 7 angels having the 7 last smitings, as it is in the Greek. There's no more coming. Oh, there's some bells ringing, brothers and sisters. These are the last judgment. We've seen God judge pagan Rome. We've seen God judge Christian Rome with all the barbarians and the Saracens and the Turks. We've seen God bring awful judgments onto France. And now, brothers and sisters, we're getting to the end. And this is the last smitings. There are no more. So what God's telling you and me is to take it in and get our house in order, because it could come any moment. And with that in our ears, having digested that verse, having used that verse as a context, we then go into Revelation chapter 16. And we read as an overview that the first vial, as we saw in our slide previous to this, would be in 1789, where God would pour out his bowl upon the earth. So you now see how Revelation 11 is so intimately and importantly linked to Revelation 16. We pick up the French Revolution in Revelation 16 and the first vial. This would in fact be the French Revolution, as Napoleon would begin to use this to catapult himself into the political firmament, as it were. Well, the second bowl would be poured out in 1793. And this would be the work of the Brits. Admiral Horatio Nelson, one of the important players in this vial. This would be the British naval blockade, as the Brits would cease the flow of something. So it would become as the blood of a dead man, you see. And so here in 1793, brothers and sisters, the Brits would come on the scene, rule Britannia. Interestingly enough, in France in 1793, while the French Revolution was going through the reign of terror, and people are getting their heads chopped off left, right and centre, the guillotine couldn't keep up, they were taking them out and leaving boats because the guillotine couldn't chop enough heads off. Well, all that was going, and Louis XVI getting his head chopped off, and Marie Antoinette getting her head chopped off, in that same year out come the Brits in the Second World War. Now the third battle happened in 1796. This would be the Alpine campaigns of Napoleon. Now here's where Napoleon comes into his own. 1796. Napoleon is 27. And he's a major general. And off he goes to kick the Austrians out of northern Italy and southern Switzerland. They hate the Austrians with a passion. So 27-year-old Major General Napoleon heads off in the third vial to commensurate the Alpine campaigns, particularly in northern Italy, to beat the Austrians. Well, the fourth vial, brothers and sisters, would take place in 1805 This would be Napoleon's European wars. Now Napoleon's not Major General Napoleon anymore. He's now Emperor Napoleon. And he's been the Emperor for 1 year. So off in the fourth file goes Emperor Napoleon. And he's going to go up to Vienna, brothers and sisters, and he's going to deal with the Austrians, and he's going to bring an end to that empire, the Holy Roman Empire, that had existed for over 1,000 years, first brought in 800 AD with the agency of Charlemagne. So in 1805, off he goes in his European wars, ultimately bring an end to the HRE, the Holy Roman Empire. Well, the papacy would not escape. And in 1808, the papacy would be repressed, and he would gnaw with the Pope his tongue because of pain, but still did not repent. And then to finish off our little overview, we have our sixth vial, as we outlined in our script before this. This will be the eclipsing of the Ottoman Empire, and we have this beginning, brothers and sisters, in 1820. Now look, why? Why does God bother to take you and me through a whole series of wars in Revelation 16? Napoleon did this, yeah. He did. Who cares? So what? It's only history, isn't it? 200 years of it. Who cares? Why does God use these stepping stones one after the other after? Where is it leading? Is it important to you and me? Should we just push it away as a now read something else? I tell you what, brothers and sisters, the reason God put these things there for you and me in Revelation 16 is these are all stepping stones, ultimately, inexorably leading to this quotation, Revelation 18 and verse 21. Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. You and I will be doing that work, a work that started here. And stepping stone after stepping stone after stepping stone, we are seeing the angels working on our behalf in order that one day everyone in this room will pick up the baton and finish off that work. You can't finish a work that you haven't really been following, because you don't have the skills to complete it. We are following this, brothers and sisters, because we're going to be involved in the end of it. That's why God's put this chapter there for you and me. What amazing. Well, it will be brought about by this means. Napoleon, an unwitting instrument of the judgment on the Holy Roman Empire and the Catholic Church. There he is at his coronation, and he's wearing Caesar's crown. He thought he was Caesar. He wanted to be anybody great. He wanted to be Alexander, he wanted to be Constantine, and greater than them. Oh, what a man this was. What an enigma this man was. He was a vessel raised up by God. But you know, brothers and sisters, Napoleon saw himself as an instrument of providence. Napoleon said this about himself. I am the instrument of providence, said Napoleon. She will use me as long as I accomplish her designs, and then she will break me as a glass. And God did. God did. God used him, and then in 1815 at Waterloo, broke him as a glass. God's not finished with him. Right? Europe's been set now. The stage has been set for the rest of the drama. What an amazing thing. And some amazing things this man not only did, but said as we track through this now. So therefore, brothers and sisters, his campaigns, did Napoleon, brought untold suffering to Italy, to Austria, to Prussia, and this will be fitting vengeance for the blood of God's servants and the anti-papal witnesses who have been persecuted mercilessly in previous centuries, as we've seen with respect, for instance, to the witnesses and also to the temple, the holy city, and the altar. I've got no idea what that slide's up there. Let me just keep going on there. I do really, but it will take far too long and we won't get through this. All right, brothers and sisters, let's pick up the first vial, as we've seen Napoleon being that unwitting instrument, and that instrument of providence. All right, so we pick up the record in Revelation chapter 16 and verse 2, and we read these words. And the first angel went and poured out his bowl upon the earth, vial 1. And there fell a grievous sore upon them which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worshipped his image. Now, brothers and sisters, let's just first pause. We made the point a minute ago. Who's the earth? Who's the beast? Who's the image? Are they related? how they work one with the other. Well, as far as the earth is concerned, one very simple quotation, of course, we've already considered, is Revelation 11 verse 4. Do you remember the anti-papal witnesses would stand against the god of the earth? So we're talking about the Roman earth. So literally, historically, in verse 2, this first bowl is poured out upon the Holy Roman earth, the Holy Roman Empire. That's where the bowl is going to be poured. On the Holy Roman Empire. Starting in France with the French Revolution and then spinning out into all of Europe through the career of Napoleon as he took this French ideology. The earth, the Holy Roman Empire. And then, brothers and sisters, with respect to the Holy Roman Empire, there is the Holy Roman Empire at its beginning. 800 AD. Charlemagne. Charles the Magnificent. Karl, they call him. K-A-R-L. Charlemagne. And he joined, of course, with the Pope. And this became the two-horned power, the two-horned beast of Revelation 13, the earth beast. Two powers, emperor and pope, both vying for supremacy over one another, we might add. But the Holy Roman Empire that we're concerned about with respect to this first Vials began in 800 AD, and that's predominantly what the Holy Roman Empire looked like in its beginning. Add a few hundred years to that, brothers and sisters, in 1215, and you'll find that the Holy Roman Empire contracted eastward. And what you find in 1250 is that you can now see France beginning to emerge in their own right. Then you add another few hundred years to the development of the Holy Roman Empire, and you see in 1530 the Holy Roman Empire was there in that portion of the area of Europe, and you can now see that the area of France is ruling within their own right. Spain was loosely connected to the Holy Roman Empire, as was Naples and Sardinia. But there is France ruling in their own right. But France was loosely connected to the Holy Roman Empire by a series of marriages. Example, Louis XVI married Marie Antoinette, and Marie Antoinette was the daughter of the Austrian or Holy Roman Empire. So there is the lie of the land in 1530, and pretty much at the time of Napoleon and the French Revolution, that is the way in which the Holy Roman Empire looked, and that's the arena that Napoleon is going to be dealing with, and there is where the bowl is going to be poured on the earth, on the Holy Roman Empire, originating, of course, firstly in France. So when you read about the earth, in Revelation 16 and verse 2, we're talking about the earth beast of Revelation 13, looked like a lamb, spoke like a dragon, emperor, pope, two powers ruling in that empire. And we read about, brothers and sisters, in verse 2, that when it went, this bowl, and was poured out on the Holy Roman Empire, there fell a noisome and grievous sword. Now, of course, in the Greek, some of us may have seen in margin, the Greek word for grievous sword is the Greek word poneros. It means hurtful. So the word grievous means a hurtful sword. The word noisome means evil. So what we've got here is an evil, malignant ulcer. It's going to be poured out on the Holy Roman Empire. In fact, the RSV translates it this way. It says a foul and painful sore came on all those who loved the papacy, absolutely adored the Pope. Put up your umbrella, Father, and let me get under your umbrella. I love you to bits. Anybody who loved the papacy, this awful, malignant, evil, painful ulcer would descend upon them and eat their flesh as ulcers tend to do. Well, brothers and sisters, here's a quotation from Belloc. We looked at a quotation earlier on with respect to the witnesses. Well, the French Revolution, page 136 through 137, says this about this malignant ulcer that would first descend upon France. The revolutionaries in the French Revolution were determined upon an interesting new earth. They went with this, there went with this, I should say, the last and most violent attack upon what was believed to be the last remnants in France of Catholicism. In France, a hideous, this is where the ulcer began, a hideous persecution of the priesthood in which an uncounted number of priests died under the rigours of transportation or of violence. So here God pours the bowl out. The ulcer begins in France and it spread like a cancer throughout all of Europe. Now there, brothers and sisters, is a map of Europe. Now there's the Holy Roman Empire. You may or may not be able to see that outlined there for us in red. That's the Holy Roman Empire. And an ulcer begins in France with the French Revolution and then spreads all the way through. When France proclaimed themselves a republic, 3 years after Louis called the Estates General together, in 1792, the effects of the revolution spread as the malignancy of the ulcer moved throughout Europe. Local to start with, and then soon, through the career of Napoleon, the whole of Europe would be affected. All right, brothers and sisters, the beast, the earth, and the image. How do we reconcile those three terms that are used in verse 2? Alrighty, we know the earth is the Holy Roman Empire, but the beast also, brothers and sisters, is reference to the Holy Roman Empire. So in your verse 2, there's the beast, the HRE, there it is, and the capital of the beast is Vienna. The capital of the Holy Roman Empire is the Vienna, and Napoleon's going to deal with Vienna later in the fourth line, the sun. What about the image? Well, there's the image there, brothers and sisters. The image is the Papal States. You see them just standing right across the peninsula of Italy there. And you see that the capital of the image is in fact Rome. So we've got there in verse 2, the beast, which is the Holy Roman Empire, and the image is in fact the Papal States with its capital in Rome. 2 horns. There's the horn there on one side of the Lamb, and there's another power or horn on the other side of this earth beast. Well, brothers and sisters, as far as Napoleon was concerned, at the beginning of the pouring out of these vials, there would be continuous war with Britain, Prussia, Austria and Russia until Waterloo. Until God had finished with this man and God broke him like a glass. But until he was broken, all millions died as a result of the revolution and the wars in Europe. Am not I worth more than 1 million men, said Napoleon? There were few men that spoke more about themselves than this man. Am I not more? Like you see some of the other expressions that he used. And in France, the beginning of the ulcer, there was the overthrow of the Catholic Church. There was the end of the Holy Roman Empire that existed for over 1,000 years, and a commenced shockwave of revolution would spread throughout Europe. You know, brothers and sisters, there's Europe. And God whispered in Napoleon's ear, but he didn't hear it. The angels were at work. There's Europe. And God said, Napoleon, that is your paddock. I put a big fence around you. You stay there. Because the outworking of these first 5 vials, God is going to bring judgment on the beast and the image. Vienna and Rome. And God says you belong there. That's the work that I have raised you up to do. You tell that to Napoleon. He wanted to go to England. You don't belong in England. He wanted to go to Egypt. You do not belong in Egypt. He wanted to go to Russia. You certainly don't belong in Russia. And so every time, brothers and sisters, every time Napoleon strayed out of that perimeter that God determined he should remain in, he was defeated. He went down to Egypt, he had to slink back, and he had his ship blown out of the water, he had to leave 30,000 of his men in Egypt, he had to get back into Europe. God says, you don't belong down in Egypt. He thought about taking England twice. And just in his contemplations, he stood on the English Channel, he thought, this is ridiculous. He could not take the Brits. Defeated. He went to Russia. Oh boy, was he defeated in Russia, brothers. Every time he strayed out of that place that God said in Revelation 16 verses 1 to 11, that's your career, Napoleon. He was always defeated. But I'll tell you what, brothers and sisters, every time he went to war in that paddock, He was always victorious until Waterloo. But then God had finished with him and broke him into glass. So, that's the first vial. Now the second is so important with respect to the fourth and the fifth. And third, I should say. I'm not good at math. So the second vial is so critically important with the third, the fourth, and the fifth, as we shall see. Alright, the second vial says this in verse 3. And the second angel poured out his bowl upon the sea, and it became as the blood of a dead man, and every living soul died in the sea. Well, of course, brothers and sisters, this was the blockade of Europe by the maritime forces of the Brits. Britain now dominates the sea as it would from 1793 right through for many, many years. Now the sea here is not only, brothers and sisters, the Mediterranean, but the surrounding seas of Europe. Now you can see that bowl there, you see? That bowl of the judgments of God was poured out to a great big rope all the way around there. And so it formed a great barrier all the way down there through Spain, France, all the way around there, all the way around there to the Italian toe, the peninsula toe there, and it would, brothers and sisters, be a barrier that would stop. Britain would control commerce. Britain would control trade. Britain would control the flow of ships. What a dominant power the Brits were. Why? Predominantly, brothers and sisters, this second vial came into play to keep Napoleon in his paddock. God says you belong there. And to make sure he stayed in that paddock in the Holy Roman Empire, God raised up this man, Nelson, who would put this big rope around Europe and also the Mediterranean. And so these two men would pit their skills against each other. What Napoleon was on the land, Nelson was on the sea. Napoleon had no idea how to manoeuvre ships, how to set them up. Nelson was brilliant. In fact, you know, when Napoleon was growing up, someone suggested he'd probably make a good naval officer in the British Navy. When he's a boy, you know, I think we should push him across to the Brits and put. Could you imagine that? And Angel said, no, that is not going to happen. Forget that advice, thank you very much. And so Napoleon would be on the land, as was Nelson on the sea. And Napoleon knew. But he had to get rid of the British. He said we must put all our strength upon the sea and we must destroy England. And if we get rid of these pesky Brits, then the continent will be at our feet. I can go anywhere I like. I can go to Egypt, India, I can go to Britain, Ceylon, anywhere I want. Well, brothers and sisters, this man in the second vial was raised up, and God was going to use the tactical genius of Admiral Horatio Nelson to defeat numerically the superior forces of Napoleon's navy. And by 1805, Britain completely dominated the seas and did so for the next 50 years. So what? Who cares about a few ships blowing each other up in the water? I'll tell you this. Have a look at this time chart and just see how strategic the second vial was with respect to the other three that have come. Third, fourth, and fifth. Now there's our first vial. French Revolution, Reign of Terror. France is a republic now, has been a republic since 1792, and out come the Brits. So, there's the second vial. Now, they're ruling the waves. That's 1805. But you see, by 1805, Britain completely dominated this and did so for the next 50 years. Let's push it out now on our chart. So let's go woof, right out there, and now we've got Britain dominating. And so the second vial becomes an overarch to keep Napoleon penned up in his paddock so that he could deal with those issues in the Holy Roman Empire. So, you see therefore the relationship between the second vial and the third, fourth and fifth. Here they are. Here's the third vial. Here's where Napoleon was going to do his work in the fountains and rivers of waters, the area north of Italy and south of Switzerland. You belong in there, Napoleon, and to make sure you stay there and do your work, the Brits are going to make sure you don't go woofing off wherever you want to woof off to. And then you have the fourth vial. And the fourth vial, brothers and sisters, begins in 1805. And this would be Napoleon's European wars and he's going to go up to Vienna. And again you see that the second vial is overarching it to make sure he stays in his paddock. And you've got the fifth vial, where the punishment or judgment will be poured upon the papers. And again you've got the second vial overarching the fifth. So you can see how the first, third, fourth and fifth are all one after the other, lineal, whereas the second overarches the third, fourth and fifth, strategically placed there to keep Napoleon where he belongs. I want to say a couple of things. Battles don't do a lot for me. I want to say a couple of things just to show you how potent the Brits were and how frustrated Napoleon got, forcing him back to his paddock in the Holy Roman Empire. Now, there are two major battles that are worth mentioning, just one or 2 points about these two battles. The first one worthy of mention is the Battle of the Nile. In August 1798, a French fleet was defeated by a smaller British armada commanded by Admiral Nelson at the Battle of the Nile at Abu Qir. Abu Qir, brothers and sisters, is there. There's the Bay of Abu Qir. So what? Who cares about the Battle of the Nile? I tell you what, who cares? Napoleon cared. Because you see, brothers and sisters, Napoleon's gone down to Egypt. He says, I'm going to Alexandria. I'm going to kick out the Mamelukes who ruled in Egypt at that time. I'm going down there into Alexandria, and then I'm going to march my men down to Cairo. And you know where he wants to go. You bet you know where he wants to go. Once he's taken Egypt and Palestine, he's got a stranglehold of the trade of the British from England to India. And not only did he want to strangle the trade and cut off the trade for Britain and cut off her resources, but also Napoleon wanted to go down to India because Alexander went there. And if Alexander the Great went there, I want to do it too. So he's down in Egypt. You see, when he gets down to Alexandria with his men, about 47,000 men, he gets to Alexandria and his little fleet dodging the British through the Mediterranean, and he marches his men down to Cairo. Shouldn't have done that. Men died through thirst. They went insane. Many of them shot their brains out because they couldn't go any further. They didn't calculate the march from Alexandria to Cairo. And when he gets down to Cairo, sure, there were a few wars in Palestine. Some he did well in, some he didn't. But when he got down, his brothers and sisters, to Cairo, with his men, down to the pyramids, he starts bringing out his scientists, bringing out his botanists, bringing out his architects, and he's bringing Egyptology back to Europe. The Rosetta Stone came back to Europe based on Napoleon's campaign down in Egypt. So there he is, he's writing sketches and he's writing poems and he's doing engineer things that engineers do. And God says, you do not belong down here. I don't care what you're doing with respect to the pyramids or Egyptology in Europe. You don't belong in Egypt. And while he was down in Cairo, brothers and sisters, along come Nelson and blew his ships out of the water. And Napoleon was stranded in Egypt. And by the way, while he was down there, it led to a coalition of forces, European states against France. Napoleon looked back to his country and said, they're a mess. Well, of course they are. You should be there. And so Napoleon had to slink back, brothers and sisters, back into the place that he belonged. The Brits made sure of that. Here's the second of one of the major battles with respect to the British. The Battle of Trafalgar, 1805. Now, Trafalgar is there at Cadiz. There's Cape Trafalgar there. Well, brothers and sisters, with respect to the British fleet consisting of 27 ships, commanded by Admiral Nelson. He's 47 is Admiral Nelson at the Battle of Trafalgar. 47. It was a fatal day for Admiral Nelson. He was wounded mortally. He engaged the French and the Spanish on the 21st of October in 1805. So what? Well, in the Battle of Trafalgar, brothers and sisters, by the day's end, 20 French and Spanish ships were totally lost, gone, annihilated. You think, oh, 20 ships. Not many in the big scheme of things. You go down to Devonport, just take your picnic lunch, take the kids. No, don't take the kids. They'll be distressed. Go down there yourselves in your picnic lunch. Sit there on the wharf. You've got a wharf at Devonport? Yeah, I think yeah. You've got a picnic area. It was like you saw the picnic area down there. Go down there with your picnic lunch and stand there and sit there and watch. In comes the princess, is it the princess of Tasmania? Spirit of Tasmania. I wrote on that one. Probably going to sing soon anyway. But you stand there and watch that and you see, they're just coming in. Whoop, it just disappeared. Whoa! And then another ship comes in an hour later. Whoa, that just sunk. You think, yeah, that's pretty dramatic. And then you sit the third hour, another. You sit there, brothers, for 20 hours. Every hour, a big ship disappears in the ocean. You think, heck, this is enormous drama. Well, it was. 20 French and Spanish ships were gone, not one single British. Or did we rule the waves, or did we not? Were these Brits pesky? Oh, they were more than pesky. They've got to get rid of them, Napoleon. You've got to get rid of them because they'll create havoc wherever they go. And they did. Now, to show you how effective the Brits were, they forced Napoleon, therefore, to engage in this third vial. I love this vial. There's so many interesting things that were happening historically with respect to this. So we read in verse 4, the potency of the Brits forced Napoleon, therefore, in verse 4, to be part of this third vial. So we read, and the third angel poured out his bowl upon the rivers and fountains of waters, and they became blood. And you see the bowl? It's been poured out on this particular peculiar area here. Now what happens, brothers and sisters, with respect to Napoleon, this was his outlying campaigns. He's now going to take northern Italy, he's going to take the Pope prisoner. Now what he does is he comes from Paris up there, and he's going to come down to Toulon, pick up some fellows, and he's going to go up there, and he's going to kick the Austrians out of that area there. Now brothers and sisters, with respect to Napoleon, have a look at now this third vial and the importance of these words. We already alluded to them very briefly in verse 6 of Revelation 16. Verse 6 is particularly and peculiarly related to this third vial. Why? Well, verse 6 reads this. And they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and thou hast given them blood to drink, for they are worthy. That is peculiarly and particularly related to the third vial. Why? Napoleon is going to pour out judgments in that area there of Piedmont. Why is he going there? Because Revelation 16 verse 6 says, because they have shed the blood of saints. And in this area, brothers and sisters, the Albigenses and the Waldenses, people who are trying to live a simple life in the mountains of these areas, trying to read their Bible, trying to follow the Lord Jesus Christ, trying to live faithfully in Christ Jesus. When Paul said to Timothy, all those who will live faithfully in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution. And they did. The cruelness with which the Waldenses and the Albigenses through history were persecuted by the Catholics, where blood flowed through these rivers. God said, I have reserved a special judgment for this area because they shed so much blood on those who tried to open their Bibles and just do the readings after dinner. And they'll persecute authors. And God says, go there, Napoleon. And before we go with him, I'm going to show you something about Napoleon. I want you, before we go with him on his march to this area, I want you to get the gist of this now. I want you to get the feel of Napoleon. I want you to enter into his mind, brothers and sisters. Let's look at him with respect to what happened to him up until this time. He's ready to head off to beat the Austrians and undo or bring judgment on what all the Catholics did on the Waldenses and the Albigenses. Well, Napoleon was born in 1796. He died in 1821. He was 52. 52. Nelson was 47 when he died. Now, Napoleon, brothers and sisters, when he was 9 years old, in 1778, he entered a French military school. He's 9. And when he went into this French military school, the other kids teased him because he had this thick Corsican accent. He spoke funny. So the other kids teased him. And that caused Napoleon at 9 years old to withdraw and become anti or non-social. When, of course, he did become social, he dominated. Surprise, surprise, at his 9. So the other kids teased him, and so that forced this little 9-year-old kid into his books. And he particularly went into the books of mathematics. He became a mathematic geek, if you like, at 9 years old, then Napoleon. Well, brothers and sisters, when he was 16 years old in 1785, he was commissioned as second lieutenant. He's 16 and he's a second lieutenant in 1785. Then in 1792, he's 23 years old and he's promoted to captain. He's 23 and he's a captain in the French army. Where's the French Revolution? Well, the French Revolution is there. Remember we said that Napoleon is 20 years old when the French Revolution breaks out. So when the French become a republic, or France becomes a republic, and the revolution's been going a few years, there's Napoleon, 23 years old, he's promoted to captain. Well, He's 24 years old, brothers and sisters. A year later, it's 1793, and he's 24 and he's made a brigadier general. Now, 1793 is a reign of terror. And people at the stage are fed up with blood. They're fed up with the Inquisition. They're fed up with this revolution that was supposed to bring so much peace and so much freedom. And there's a groundswell in France in 1793, and there is all these people that want the monarchy back. We want the king back. We don't want this revolution anymore. And through Paris, there are these 25,000 people chanting, we want the Bourbon kings back. It's a crazed mob, brothers. It's a mob. It's a crazed mob. And so they're scratching their heads around thinking, who's going to deal with the mob? This is a crazy people. Who's going to deal? Oh, you know, we'll get Napoleon. He'll deal with them. I tell you what, brothers, he might only be 5'2", but he was a brutal man. He was a man of decisive decision. We'll get Napoleon. You know how to handle a crazed mob. And he did. Napoleon said to his mate, get a cannon. His mate said, what do I do with it? Stick it in the street. What do I do then? He said, watch. And so these 25,000 people come swarming around the street and said, well, let it off. Boom! He just blew them. 200 people, brothers. He killed 200 of his own people. And all he said was, well, we just gave them a whiff of grape shot, didn't we? And he quelled the uprising. Well, as a result of blowing the cannon, I mean, brothers and sisters, they had problems on their border with the Prussians, with the Russians, with the Austrians, and he's blowing his own people to smithereens. Well, as a result of that, they promoted him to Major General. That's what they're doing for him. You see, you just put a cannon in the street, blow a few people out of Launceston, and they'll promote you to mayor. So there they were, brother. They promoted him to Major General, and he's 26 years old in 1795. Well, he then met Josephine. It wasn't all war. It was all love there as well, you see. So he met Josephine, brothers and sisters. He's 27. It's 1796. Now, Josephine was a widower. Widower. What's the female? Widow. No, I better get it right. So Josephine was a widow, and she was a few years older than Napoleon. She had a couple of children, and she saw her days. She was in the mid-30-ish, and so she saw her days numbered. So she saw this young man, this young star, and a good catch, you see. And so Napoleon was infatuated with Josephine, and he married Josephine, you see. Here he is, he's a major general, he's 27 years old, and he marries her, falls in love. But he only had 1 or 2 nights with her after they got married. He said, sorry, darling, love you to bits, got a war to fight, see ya, we'll write. And so off he goes to his campaign in the fountains and rivers of waters, you see. The third vial. He's off. We'll finish off our chart. When Napoleon reaches the age of 30, brothers and sisters, it's 1799, and he seizes power. Now you've got to be careful here. It's a bit tricky. Because in between the time that he marries Josephine and heads off to his Alpine campaigns in northern Italy, and the time he seizes power as the first consul, in between there he's gone down to Egypt. Right? He's been down to Egypt doing all those sketches of the pyramids, and he had to get back because they blew his ships out of the water. Alrighty, he's 27. He's married Josephine, had a couple of nights with her, see you, darling, off they go, and there he is, brothers and sisters. He's going to the area of the fountains and rivers of waters. He comes down from Paris, and he comes down here to Toulon, you see. He's got to go up there and kick the Austrians out of this area. So he comes down from Paris, and he comes down to Toulon, and he's got to pick up the Italian army. So he gets down to Toulon. He looks at the Italian army and says, who are you? And they said, we're the Italian army. He said, where's your horses? They said, we ate them. He said, where's your guns? They said, we left them in the field of battle. He's got to go and meet the Austrian. And he's got all these decrepit, sickly-looking bunch of scramblers, and they've just eaten the horses, and you go and meet the Austrian. He's got 3 months to go. I'd be saying, I'm going back to Josephine. No way am I marching with you guys. They did. 3 months, brothers. They just eat their horses. Didn't know where their weapons were. 3 months. He inspired with rhetoric. He inspired with example. And he marched in, and in 1796, he's 27 and he's a major general, and there was battle after battle, brothers and sisters, in this area of fountains and rivers of waters, and one after the other, these battles were fought all the way through this area where the Catholics had brought much blood, and the third angel now was going to pour out his vial because they would become blood by virtue of the blood that they had originally shed. the Catholics themselves. All right, brothers and sisters, let's go and beat the Popes. Let's go and deal with the Pope, shall we? So after defeating the Austrians in Lombardy, Napoleon then turned on the papacy and headed south. Well, the Pope heard Napoleon was coming with his French army, with the Italian army. The Pope said, oh, we're going to get an army together. So he got all these fanatical peasants together with pitchforks and, I don't know, spikes and whatever. They were no match for the French army, brothers and sisters. The French army come in to sweep these fanatical peasants right to one side, and they defeated the Pope's army at Vials and Ancona, and Napoleon advanced on Rome, and the Pope sued for peace. He was given, brothers and sisters, blood to drink. Well, he's finished his Alpine campaign. He's 27. He's coming back to Paris. But I tell you, brothers and sisters, after his triumph in Italy, he's coming back, and as he comes into Paris, the people absolutely love him. They just adore Napoleon. They love him to bits. He is the man of the day, and he's coming back into Paris. Now, he's been over there in Italy. He's been negotiating with the Pope. He's been negotiating with the King of Naples. He's been carving up land. He's been writing law, and he's a politician. He's actually a government on the move, is Napoleon. He's not just a general. He's a supreme tactician and politician. He's loved by the people. He's loved by his men. His men will do anything for him. And he's coming back to an unstable, corrupt, shaky government in Paris. They don't want him. He's dangerous. He's good, but he's dangerous. We want him out fighting wars, because who knows what he will do here if he gets here. So they said, Napoleon, we need to give you a project. He said, what is it? Go and invade England. So they sent him up there to see what he could do to invade England. So he gets up to the English Channel, and he's standing there on the English Channel. I can hear the way he thinks, because I'm almost the same height as him. And I'm standing there, brothers and sisters, and I'm thinking, where's the pot? He's standing on the channel, he says, England, right, what do I need? Oh, I need a few thousand probably a few hundred flat-bottom boats. How many men do I need? Oh, 60,000, 40,000, probably I need about 30,000 men, a few hundred flat-bottom boats, 30,000 men-ish. How long do I need to be on the channel? Oh, 10 hours, 6 hours. That's what I need. Few hundred flat-bottom boats, 30 or so thousand men, 6 hours on the channel. I need the Dutch, I need the Spanish. He gone. It's a blame that's never ends. He's thinking, 6 hours. Look, brothers and sisters, if he put his foot in the English Channel for 1 minute, I would have blown his foot off the bridge. He wouldn't have lasted 3 seconds. So Napoleon's going, I can't do this. This is impossible. There's no way you can do this. He went back to Paris. He said, nah, you'd be a madman to try and do this. What do you want me to do? Go down to Egypt. You see how the history goes? Come back from his Alpine campaigns. Go down to Egypt. And when he was down in Egypt, as we've already recounted, he was down there, brothers and sisters. The Austrians, with the help from Russia, retook Italy. All the work that he'd done in kicking out the Austrians with his motley crew of Italian army, all the work that he'd done was undone. And one historian says this, that the Russian leader who led this coalition of forces in 2 months took all of what Napoleon had taken ages to do. That was God working. There were the angels, brothers. Take that back and do it quickly to make sure this man comes back from Egypt. And so he did. He forsook his army in Egypt and he returned to Paris, where by the turn of events he became the first consul, soon to become emperor, in the coup of 1799. Well, our study's nearly finished. You're hanging out for lunch. How you doing? How you going? Just probably need a break. Oh, I'm so tired. Just need a break. Just come down here with you, just to check and make sure. What time do we start? Don't tell me that, because it means you're watching the clock. Oh, is everything going? How you going, kids? You going all right? Back here? Everything fine? Okay, you're colouring in. George, taking notes. I'm just checking your Bibles, actually. Yeah, no, it's nice. This is for your benefit. All right. Now, just a couple of minutes, brothers and sisters. This is really, I just want you to sort of focus, if you would, just focus for a few minutes. This is amazing. The Bible is just, how can people lose interest in the Word of God? How can we say the Word of God is alive? How can we say that what's out there in the world is far more attractive than what this is? Oh, here we need to shake ourselves sometimes, do we not? Well, Napoleon, brothers and sisters, now comes to the time where no longer Major General, he's now going to be Emperor. And the way it's been paid, in 1799 he came in, there were 3 consuls. They wanted him as the junior man. They needed to overthrow the directorate. They needed a man of war. And they were going to relegate him to the 3rd consulate position. You tell that to Napoleon. No way. When he came in and became the 1st consul, he was the man. He was the top man. And he was ruling himself at this moment. 1804, Napoleon consolidates his power, brothers and sisters, convincing the people that he really does concern about the people's voice, that he's really a dictator. Let me tell you, he's a very clever man. Now this crowning of Napoleon, brothers and sisters, was the beginning of the end. This is the beginning of the end of this man. Because you see, brothers and sisters, Napoleon might have been 5'2", but he had the ego of an 8-foot giant. He was absolutely full of himself. He was full of himself, as Napoleon. And so when he was crowned, he didn't go to Italy and said to the Pope, here, crown me, I've just come to visit you. He said to the Pope, you get over here, I'm not coming to you, and I'm wanting you to come to Notre Dame. You are coming here. Now, there's the photograph, well not photograph, there's the paint. They didn't have digital cameras back in those days. If they did, Napoleon probably would take credit for it anyway. So full of himself was he. But there's a painting, brothers and sisters, of the coronation. There he is. He reckoned there was a man, 1,000 or so years ago called Charlemagne that crowned himself. He said, I'll do the same. So he calls the Pope over here, brothers and sisters, and he said, you sit there and you watch. Now when the artist painted all of these pictures, and the artist that Napoleon had painted lots, hundreds and hundreds of paintings, some fanciful and some true. Well, when the artist was about to paint the painting of the coronation, the artist said to Napoleon, your mum's not here. Well, she didn't go. Napoleon's mother said, I'm not going. I don't like Josephine. She should not be the Empress of France. No way am I going. And so when the painter went, your mum's not here, what do I do? Napoleon said, paint her in. And the artist said, well, what would she say? She will thank me later. Paint her in. And you see, brothers and sisters, you see the Pope there, sitting there with his little hand out there, with the hand out stretched like that. He wasn't doing that. Napoleon said, you sit there and you watch. You do nothing. And so the Pope's sitting there and he's got his hands on his knees and he's watching. Well, when the artist started to draw the painting, Napoleon said, oh, you better make out the Pope was doing something. He called him over. He put his hand up there and make out he's doing the sign of a cross or something. He did what he liked. He just called the shots. This man was so full of himself. Well, we now move in now to this 4th Bible, brothers and sisters, to show how this man was just known throughout the world as a man who did not mess with. And so we read in verse 8, the 4th angel poured out his vial on the sun, and power was given unto him that he scorch men with fire. Now this was Napoleon's Austrian campaign. And Napoleon is going to go to Vienna, the capital of the Holy Roman Empire. I want you to just, if you will, stay with me. Stay with me for a couple of minutes, if you will. You don't tell me. You haven't stayed with me. Make out of it. Now, brothers and sisters, look at this. This is amazing. To me, this is amazing. He's going to Vienna. Now, the sun, of course, in the Bible, is a symbol of political power. Psalm 89, verse 36, talks to the Lord Jesus Christ as the Son. S-U-N. The Son, the Lord Jesus Christ in Psalm 89, who would come and one day wrest political authority and power from the powers that be and would reign over the earth. In Revelation 8 and verse 12, the sun is eclipsed, the Latin part of the Roman Empire, by the 4th wind trumpet. How do you talk about that? This one I find amazing. You know Revelation 12 and verse 1, back to front, inside out, upside down. You know in Revelation 12 and verse 1 that a woman's introduced in heaven, Revelation 12 verse 1, she's clothed with the sun. She's got the moon under her feet, she's got 12 stars around her head. You know that's the apostasy. You know that's Christianity gone bad and is now wearing the political shroud of authority. Revelation 12 verse 1. I tell you what, brothers and sisters, Napoleon's going up to Vienna, the capital of the Holy Roman Empire, that was started by Charlemagne. What's Charlemagne? What's Revelation 12 and verse 1, with a woman clothed with the sun, got to do with Napoleon here in AD 1805? Well, I'll show you this. There, brothers and sisters, in Europe, the sun had been the Holy Roman Empire since AD 800. So since Charlemagne came in and established this empire that Napoleon is now going to bring him to, it has been the sun of Europe for over 1,000 years. He's going to deal now with the very thing that Charlemagne brought in. And what's that got to do with Revelation 12 verse 1 with the woman clothed with the sun? Have a look at this. There's the cathedral in Aachen. Charlemagne built that. Charlemagne, the founder of the Holy Roman Empire, that Napoleon's going to get rid of. Charlemagne was born in Aachen, not at the temple, in that cathedral. But Charlemagne built that. Now there's Aachen there, brothers and sisters. Aachen is as it is in Germany at the moment, but Aachen was there, the capital of Charlemagne's empire, the birthplace of Charlemagne, and a cathedral that he built. What's important about that? Well, let's go inside the cathedral. And as we go inside that cathedral, brothers and sisters, notwithstanding the amazing stained glass windows, that cathedral that Charlemagne built, the founder of the Holy Roman Empire, there's a golden woman standing on the moon. She's wearing the sun, and she's got 12 stars around her head. Charlemagne put that there. Where did he get that from? He got it from Revelation 12 and verse 1. And no less than 32 emperors were crowned in Aachen, in that cathedral, under that sun, which was taken from Revelation 12 and verse 1. And Napoleon's coming to take it out, brothers and sisters. Well, of course, history shows us that from 1438 to 1806, the rulers of the Holy Roman Empire invariably came from Austria. And so the ruler of Austria was regarded as the ruler of the Holy Roman Empire. What an amazing thing. Revelation 12 verse 1. Think about it. Charlemagne builds this cathedral. Emperors are crowned under this woman wearing a sun. And up goes Napoleon to the sun, the capital of the Holy Roman Empire. What an amazing thing. Well, here he comes, the man of fire. The record says in Revelation chapter 16 and verse 8 that the fourth angel pointed his vial on the capital of the Holy Roman Empire, Vienna, and power was given to Napoleon to scorch men with fire. And we're not going to go through the Battle of Austerlitz, the Battle of Montebello, the Battle of Ulm, none of those things, brothers and sisters. If you read the English tabloids of the day of Napoleon's wars, the thing that you read in the British tabloids, they kept writing about Napoleon as a man of fire. Every time he set cannons off, he knew how to set cannons off in such a way that when he blasted them, it was like he was surrounded by fire. But I'll tell you this, no greater incident than the Battle of the Pyramids can show what people thought about this man of fire than when Napoleon was down in Egypt originally, and when he went down there, and there was this battle that took place called the Battle of the Pyramids, where Napoleon faced the awful fierceness of the mammals of the Nile, 2 hours, in panic of flight. Many were cut down while the pursuing French, and those who escaped carried to all parts of Egypt the fame and terror of Sultan Kabir. They called him the King of Fire. What an amazing thing. And you can multiply those quotations time and time again. Well, this is the end of our study. We need 1 minute for this one. The fifth angel pointed his vial on the seat of the beast. The papacy would not escape, brothers and sisters. And this would be Napoleon's Italian campaign as the papal states would fall and Rome would be taken. And so there now, he's done Vienna, he's done the Alpine regions, the Waldenses and the Albigenses as justification, and now he's going to pour out the vial on Rome itself. And so, brothers and sisters, in 1809, Napoleon took the Pope prisoner. The Roman state was abolished, and the Pope was banished from Rome. Did that affect the papacy? No, it did not. Verse 11. They still blaspheme the God of heaven because of their pains and their sores, and the Catholics, irrespective of what God had done to the pagans, the Christians, and now the Holy Romans, they still would not repent. And therefore, brothers and sisters, it shows you that even after he did all these things in 1809, it shows you that in 1824 they circulated this doctrine that anybody who circulates scriptures without Romish interpretations, they denounce them as poisonous pastures. You can't read your Bible except you have Rome's interpretation. If you do, you're reading in poisonous pastures. That's blasphemy. In 1854, they brought in the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception. Worship Mary. They blasphemed the God of heaven. And then, brothers and sisters, in 1870, when they got kicked out of their temporal power, they brought in the dogma of the infallibility of the Pope. And on, the scroll of the wickedness of their deeds was there for all men to see who had eyes. They still would not repent. And so the papal throne had been abolished. Napoleon's work was done. God was going to break into glass. And his further campaign simply added to the absolute misery already experienced by the worshippers of the beast and his image. And so, brothers and sisters, Napoleon was defeated at Waterloo on June 18, 1815. And he was exiled to the remote Atlantic island of St. Helena. Napoleon died in 1821, and he was 52. Brother Thomas, or John Thomas, was 16 when Napoleon died. He didn't know the truth. Can you see why the passion in books like Eureka were there? And God raised up John Thomas. He wasn't infallible. He didn't have it all right to start with. But God raised up John Thomas as surely as he raised up Napoleon, as surely as he raised up Nelson. And what Nelson was on the sea, Napoleon was on the land. And what Napoleon was on the land, John Thomas was on the Bible. I'm not eulogising for one whit, brothers and sisters, but he was a man raised up. And therefore, brethren and sisters, if the French Revolution had not happened, if the wars in Europe had not happened through the career of Napoleon, if the church and state had not been separated, you and I would not be here today. We've got so much to be thankful for, and so much interest we should have in the work of the angels. And God willing, in our study, which is great, we actually finished the study. I do thank you for your indulgence to allow us to do that. But we will, brothers and sisters, after lunch, pick up our last study, as it were, and our study will be on the 6th vial, and will be under the title, A Way Prepared, as we now look at our particular involvement in the things that we have already historically